All right, thanks everybody for joining us. We'll go ahead and get started. Chris, would you like to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us and taking time out of your days to spend a little time with us today. My name is Chris Becker. I am a strategic planner with an advertising agency, marketing communications agency in Louisville, Kentucky. Strategic planner is a fancy word for somebody who does a lot of research and tries to develop information that helps marketers market their products, to their prospects and their consumers. So, hi everybody.
Thank you, Chris. So we just want to give a special thanks out to the partners that we work with, the Kentucky Department of Agriculture. We're part of University of Kentucky's Cooperative Extension Services. We'd also like to thank the Food Systems Innovation Center and our partners at the Kentucky Center for Agricultural and Rural Development. We would also like to give special thanks to the Specialty Crop Block Grant Program that's helped us fund this webinar series. And we can go ahead and get into the nitty gritty. So, Chris, if you want to take over from here.
Will do. Thanks, Alex. I appreciate it.
Yep.
So what I want to cover with you folks today is really a couple of different topics. And my purpose is to discuss why telling your story is an important element for success in marketing your products. And we'll talk a lot about your story and what that really means. And the way we're going to do that is I'm going to talk a little bit about some other producers and farmers that have been successful in crafting and telling their stories. And as a result, they have grown and built their business pretty successfully. And then the payoff, I hope, would be that you have interest in and want to pursue telling your story as you go to the marketplace to sell your products to potential restaurants or consumers at retail or even on the farm where you guys raise your crops. Our topics are going to cover a range of things. What's this opportunity about telling your story? What is that all about? And really, what does your story really mean? And I said, examples of producers and stories that they've told to grow their businesses. I've also got a story about a famous Kentucky brand that I want to share with you towards the end of our conversation today, and how that business has succeeded by really telling their story to different consumers. And how to really define what your story is. I'd like to take you through just a short map on how you would potentially define the story that you could bring to the marketplace. And then obviously open it up to questions and discussion. And I've said to Alex that if you guys have any comments or want to stop me and ask questions during this, by all means, feel free to do so. This is really for your benefit and as much as you can get out of it as you want. So I would encourage as much discussion as we can throughout this seminar. So,
Chris, I just want to mention that if you guys have questions throughout the course of the webinar, down at the bottom there's a Q&A and a chat section. Either one of those will work. If you guys want to put in some questions, we'll read them aloud and get Chris to answer them for us.
And trust me, if I don't have the answer to every question, and I'm sure there are some good ones out there, but given the opportunity, I certainly will get back to those whose questions have not been answered properly and spend some time with you separately. So let's get going a little bit. So what's this opportunity? We talk about telling your story, and it's really all about this farm to table phenomenon that's been happening in the marketplace for a number of years. And when you look at the top 20 food trends in 2016, as reported by the National Grocers Association and the National Restaurant Association, it's pretty interesting to see how locally sourced meats and produce are really rising to the top of consumers' concerns and demands, if you will, in the marketplace. This whole idea of hyperlocal sourcing, and then this thing called farm estate branded items. I mean, of the 20 top food trends in 2016, 4 of them have to do with locally grown products and really understanding the story, if you will, behind those products, which is what that 4th item is, farm and estate branded items. What What is it about that farm? What is it about that family or that company that's doing that and presenting and delivering those local goods to marketplace? So we know that that opportunity from a consumer standpoint from the industry certainly exists. Further, increasing demand by consumers for locally grown farm products is continuing to be on the rise. So any number of sources, is defining locally grown. Community farm markets, on-farm retail, so those of you who have actual stores on the farm, community-supported ag, where you subscribe to a grower for product over the course of a season, home delivery, restaurants. There's a lot of interest here in Louisville with some restaurants on locally grown products and having farmers actually come in and give talks and tastings of their products. So that's a really quickly growing segment. Grocery, we all know about Kroger and Meijer's interest in locally grown products in this state, of course, around the country. More and more shelf space is given to products that are locally grown, and it's an important outlet. And you'll see some numbers here in a minute that suggest it's really driving the fuel, if you will, of the business. Farm to school, there's a lot of products now available at local schools, and children are learning about the farms and how those products are raised in an educational standpoint. So again, another hot trend. And likewise, farm to college. Same idea, perhaps more sophisticated, but the same idea. So again, that opportunity is there for locally grown products in different ways of getting it into the consumer's hands or mouths, as the case may be. What is local? And again, there are a lot of things that, there's loosely defined terms of local. Is local really mean something within the town, within the county or state boundaries? Is local regional? Is local made in the USA? I mean, the term has been bandied about, probably misconstrued and misused. For purposes of this conversation, I'd like to think local is production within specific mile radius to the consumer's purchase and consumption. So let's call it a 30 to 50 mile radius around a store, around a restaurant. Again, I'm being very roughly defined, but something that's more local than not. And I'd like to draw, if you will, a circle around locations and make that kind of the local area. Business is booming. Sales of locally grown food is becoming a major food industry in the marketplace. When you look at 2014, which is just 3 years ago, $11.7 billion in locally grown food is being sold through different points of purchase. In 2019, that's almost going to double to $20.2 billion. And we get that from packaged facts. And really what's driving that, I'd have to say clearly farm to table and farmers markets, farm to table restaurants, but the big retail chains are carrying locally grown produce and meats. And when you look at the Walmarts and the Krogers of the world, they drive that scale, they drive those numbers to that significant amount. The point is, Walmart and Kroger would not be in the business if they didn't realize there was a trend there that consumers accepted and wanted. And oh, by the way, they could charge more money for it and you could make more money yourself. So clearly there's a big business opportunity out there for the locally grown segment. Consumers, what do they have to say about locally grown? Well, research says that consumers will pay, or 1 in 2 consumers will pay 10% plus pricing when they go to buy products. So they're willing to pay a 10% premium, and 1 in 3 will pay 30% extra for products. So clearly they're understanding and embracing locally grown and are willing to pay more for it. And why is that? Well, there's a perception out there, and it's true, that the products that are locally grown are higher quality, they're fresher, they're more authentic, and they're more trustworthy, because after all, your names and your businesses are behind it and you're local. Food tastes better and retains more nutrients. Again, another perception that drives consumer interest. Buying local really means supporting the local community, which is something consumers feel good about, and that's kind of an emotional tug. And then they're interested in who's producing it, who's raising it, who's growing it. They take an interest in folks that are from their regions or areas. And as a result of that, they embrace and purchase that product. And again, as you can see, they're willing to pay 10 to 30% more than they normally would that same product if it were on the shelf at Kroger under an unbranded, in the vegetable rack somewhere. So clearly there's value that the consumer associates this. And so the question becomes, how can you take advantage of this? We know that the opportunity is there. We know the business is there. We know the consumer is embracing it. How does the farmer, how does the producer take advantage of this? Well, we think there are two reasons why consumers buy. Okay, well, the one is technical. I mean, the way you raise your crops or what you feed your livestock. These are all the ways you farm, the methods you farm. Based on science, based on legacy and history, you do things a certain way, and there's a technicality to that, and that's one reason consumers may buy. But the other reason, which I want to emphasize with you today, is the emotional piece of this. What are your reasons for wanting to do this? What does the farmer get out of producing and raising and bringing these things to market? What is the story, if you will, behind that produce? So what is your story? So things like what motivates you and members of your family to farm. What does farming and your farm mean to you? What are your values as a farmer? And how are they reflected by you and your products? Consumers take a significant, deep interest in these kinds of stories and are willing to listen and read and study and then ultimately purchase. Stories sells food. People like learning about other people. Emotionally, they like to understand what's behind the product. Consumers enjoy and will pay a premium when they can learn more about you. On your farm, they can actually interact with you. So we know that on-farm retail is successful because people meet the family, they meet the farmers, they meet the people in the business right there at their place of business. At the grocery, well, they can learn about you through your packaging, the sales collateral that you might have on hand, or on-shelf merchandising. And this seminar talks about packaging and labeling. We're going to touch upon that today as an important messenger for your story, but clearly that begins to tell that important story about who's behind this product. And at restaurants, many times they can meet with and interact with you or learn about what you raise from your restaurateur or on the menu or on table. So there are different ways to tell your story, different platforms to tell your story that the consumer can get to, and being able to connect those stories with consumers gives you an advantage competitively, because people want to learn and know and actually enjoy the learning process that goes behind the food that they're eating or that they're buying. Let's talk about a couple of stories of some farmers or producers that actually have told their story, some of which you may know, some you may not know. We're going to talk about Laura's Lean Beef. It's a Lexington farmer. We're going to talk about Picket Fence Creamery out of Iowa, and then Equus Run is a vineyard that also is here in Kentucky as well. Let's talk about Laura. 1985, Laura Freeman took over her family farm near Lexington, Kentucky. And Laura built her story around two very significant but emerging consumer trends. So Laura went back and did some market research and understood a couple of things. One, beef was getting the reputation of having high levels of fat and cholesterol. So if you will, beef was getting a bad rap. And Laura knew that and acknowledged that. And then secondly, consumers were gaining interest of the locally raised beef and locally raised products. So by doing her homework and asking questions of her consumers, Laura's commitment became to raise better beef to help her customers. So she literally went in and branded and packaged her foods Laura's Lean Beef. This was intentional. It was specific to the learning that she got from the marketplace. and it told her story in a very effective, concise way, which resonated with consumers, given their concerns. So what started as a 10,000-year on-farm brand rose to sales of 135 million in just under 15 years. A tremendous amount of growth based on effectively leveraging that story. And then ultimately, Miss Freeman sold out to Meyer Natural Angus in 2008 for well over $200 million. And they continue to market her brand now, I think nationally, again, using that same label and that same approach. Some of the ways that Laura told her story, and again, this is just for example only. No one expects everybody to go off and, start advertising and building websites and all those things, but it just gives you an idea of how the story unfolded. On her website, she has different stories and blogs and articles of interest, and of course, in her packaging, she carries that Laura's Lean Beef label. And then she puts out recipes that are consistent with her positioning, which is good for you, better for you recipes that feature that lean beef that she markets. So packaging, website, social media, blogs, and print ads, the story came out and continues to come out across those platforms, all consistently supporting her findings on consumers' concerns with beef, and then obviously the trend of a local farmer trying to satisfy the needs of their customers. So that's Laura out of Lexington. Let's go to Jeff and Jill Burkhart's story, Picket Fence Creamery, and that's in Iowa. They started the creamery in 2003. Their story is really to, if you will, celebrate the real taste of milk. They believe that nutrition can actually look and taste delicious. And rather than the generic milk that everybody purchases at retail, they did something special. They decided to produce their milk with higher levels of butterfat, and that actually transformed and made the milk different, kind of a slightly different color. It actually tasted different. It had a sweeter taste to it, and they marketed their business or their brands based on these ideas and this story. The results from their efforts are they have a robust on-farm retail store that they've opened. They've got distribution at local retail, so they're in retail markets around the Iowa area that they farm, and they're also selling through local restaurants. I'm gonna play a video for you, I hope, which kind of gives you the story of their farm and gives you an idea of how they're doing it. So bear with me. Let's see if we can do this.
But first, let's visit a small family farm producing big dairy flavors.
So Chris, I think that's opened in another window.
Oh, it didn't open?
Maybe drag it over on top of the PowerPoint.
Okay, hold on.
Creamery cows graze and begin the process of producing wholesome milk.
Just hold off for a second. Let me see if I can do this. Give me a sec. See if I can do this. Nope.
Better, rich,
Nope.
and delicious cream.
Well, I tried. Sorry about that. I wasn't able to do that. But anyway, it gives the story of their farm and how they came together and recognized the fact that they could give this kind of new identity, new revitalization to milk and really drive the business. So again, the Burkharts from Iowa, telling their story, developing a following, and building their business. Equus Run. Equus Run is a local winery. You all probably are familiar with it, or those in Kentucky are familiar with Equus Run. They're in Woodford County. Cynthia Bond is the founder of Equus Run. She opened it in 1997. And Cynthia's story is based on her tradition as let me explain. She took the idea of blending a tradition of winemaking in a non-traditional place, horse country, kind of an interesting juxtaposition of, who would make one in horse country, but it seemed to make sense and create some interest. And then she grew up on a tobacco farm, so she embraced hard work, and she tells that story in her website and her marketing. They converted a tobacco, hay, and cattle land to plant vines, which kind of resonated, I think, with local folks who knew that the tobacco industry was going away, and what do we do with these lands? And she thought about the conversion to vines, which made sense. And then she really brought the community together. They actually had a mass planting where she invited local residents to come in and help her plant the vines and participate, if you will, in the launch of that winery. Again, taking a story about her background and her love of the land and converting the land and then making it into something that today is a significant business in the state. She sells 91,000 cases per year, that's a lot of wine. She sells 15 varieties of it, and as you can see, her revenues have grown nicely. In 2012, she was in sales of plus 17%, and today in 2013 she was ahead 23%. So she's really doing quite well, and now it's become one of the most popular attractions in the state of Kentucky. So she's taken her story and really crafted it and developed a business that's attracted lots of consumers. Now, wine is very different from milk. I get it, but I use the example to show how you can take that story and really leverage it and drive it to consumers for interest and potential purchase. And there's some of Equus Run's packaging and their website, some of the ways they've taken that story and started to lay it out to consumers to gain business and generate volume. Okay, let's talk about, so those are three cases. Let's talk about you folks. How do you tell your story? You have to get started, we think, on telling your story by beginning to more clearly define some more important elements of your narrative. So I'm sure many of you already have done this, but it might be just for purposes of trying to get to what that story is all about. What's your mission? What is the goal for your farm, for your business? And your vision. How do you see accomplishing these goals? So you've got your mission. Now the vision says, well, how am I going to get there? And then the business philosophy. How do you want to do your business? How do you want to do business with your customers? Again, ways that you want to approach the market. These are things that you can start to define or clarify and really start to set yourself up for telling the right story, which would be your story. And then the business goals. What are your goals to grow your business? Some things that have been interesting out there in terms of stories, the family and farm legacy or history, being stewards of the land, faith, farm, and family. All of these are interesting stories that other farmers have told that have resonated with customers and have helped drive their business. As I said, these are just some examples of stories and brand stories that people have told that have helped get their business differentiated and have helped consumers really understand and be motivated to want to buy and purchase from you versus somebody else. There's several chapters that are important for your story, and let me kind of walk you through that. Basically, chapter 1 is your business objectives. How do you want to grow? what are your revenue goals? What are your, what are your production goals? Really, where do you want to get as a business person? Chapter 2 is to really understand your most important customer. Who are they? Who is the core user of your product? Who are the ones that believe in you, understand your story, and really want to do business with you? And understanding the customer helps you in chapter 3, which is to really develop and finalize that story for your customer. Again, what is it about you and the way you do business, or the way you grow your products, and the way you treat, your customers, that makes you different from your competition? Chapter 4 is one of the more important ones, is how to tell your story. And just because once we have the story, we have to figure out a way to tell it. And logo and packaging labels are the most important parts of that story, because it's really the first impression that the consumer gets about you, is what they see on your bottle or on your package or whatever it is that you're selling and how you're packaging it. They get a first impression from that initial, if you will, image or story, and that really starts the telling of your story. And then the key message, which is the heart of your story. It's what is it about you? It's the core reason why you're in business and why you sell the great products that you do. And those are things that consumers, again, resonate to and are attracted by, because they want to know about you. So when you can tell that story that way, it's very compelling. And then the 5th chapter is really, how do you deliver it? We talk about these different media platforms. You've got big producers out there that are doing, lots of different things, and then you've got folks that are just starting out. What budget do you have, and what's the most reasonable media platform to reach that customer? And these are parts of a book that end up hopefully telling a compelling story in the right way to the right people at the right time, to ultimately drive your business and make you successful with your produce or whatever you're bringing to the marketplace to sell. Let me tell you a story about a famous Kentucky brand that I've been involved with. And we call it the L8 story, or retelling, if you will, of a legendary story. Essentially, the situation is one of Kentucky's most iconic brands has a long history as the only family-held and privately owned soft drink in Kentucky. I wonder if everybody out there knows that. But in Winchester, Kentucky, stands L81, founded in 1926. It's as popular in the Commonwealth as bourbon and maybe even horse racing, but it is definitely a very big, iconic brand in this state. 4 years ago, they plan to expand the brand outside of Kentucky into Indiana, Ohio, Tennessee, and West Virginia, and eventually they want to expand it across the southeastern part of the U.S. But the challenge is, how do you make the L8 story relevant to consumers in these new areas? So they already had a story, which is they were a little bit further down the line, having been in business, well over 90 years. They already had their story. The question was, what do we need to do to make sure that story is relevant to consumers that are buying the product for the first time in other states? So my company, Field Trip, My company, Field Trip, worked with L81 team to ensure that the L8 story was relevant to this new consumer without losing the extreme loyalty of their current users. And if anyone knows about L8 or is brought up with L8 knows that there is a significantly loyal customer base. I would say almost as loyal as UK basketball fans are, but certainly really L8 runs in their family, if you will, and it's something to tell a story outside the footprint, but you don't want to lose those loyal customers. And some of you folks may have that same challenge with the products that you're bringing to the marketplace too. So the question is, what story can you tell that is relatable regardless of where you're marketing the product? So we did a bunch of research. We went out and talked to users both in the core market here in Eastern Kentucky and also potential users out in these other areas. And we discovered that there were some similarities of perceptions and attitudes towards not necessarily a Kentucky brand, but an independent, privately held company that had been in business with an iconic brand for many, many years. People in Tennessee actually appreciate that. People in West Virginia appreciate that. It's not so much that it's a Kentucky brand. It's more of a family and a story that holds up throughout all these years. So that's what the research drove us to. And this is the story that we have begun to tell for Ale8 in these other markets. So this is what we call a brand position. And it's kind of our commitment to the brand and to the users that we sell to. We don't cater to the common. We don't run on a beaten path. Confident that being made from scratch is the only way. Loyal, steady, and proudly unconventional since 1926. Our history is inspiration for the future. We have our own crisp, clean taste. For those that share our independent, pioneering spirit and our discontent with the common can, we raise in Ale8, the drink for those who find their own flavor. Prove how great different can be. Share the best of the bluegrass in green glass. Open one yourself. Again, the whole notion of this pride and this independence and this kind of pioneering spirit appealed to users that did not necessarily live in Kentucky. So with that, we were able to start to expand the brand, develop some packaging and some refreshing new ways of positioning the product that has really started to take off. And the brand is now being distributed along the Carolinas and Virginia down to Florida. It's in Cracker Barrel across the country. We have successfully expanded into Indiana, and we are going to be in Tennessee within the next couple of months. So we've gained a lot of traction with the story and are very proud that we were able to tell it and make it relevant to consumers both inside and outside the Commonwealth of Kentucky. How can Field Trip help you? We can help you write and tell your story if you're so interested. What we would do is suggest that we would conduct interviews with you or your stakeholders, 2 or 3 loyal customers, and from there develop your business plan and define your special connection with those customers. So I can assure you that those who do business now with loyal users, there's a connection that you have with them. And our job would be to uncover that and reveal that and develop that as part of your approach to the market. We'd also do category research, which is what are other producers doing in and around your area to connect with consumers, if at all? Or what are some best practices that are happening out there? We've already shown you a couple of cases, and maybe there's a couple more that we can talk about. And then we would literally help you write your story. We would work with you to lay out your story in a way that will appeal to you, your stakeholders, the people that work with you, as well as your customers. So we would find ways to make sure that what we need to talk about resonates effectively with those customers. And then starting to tell your story, we would be more than happy to consider helping design your logo. Utilize the talents of professional designers to craft the most important element of your story, which is how you look in that first glance to the consumer, either on a label or on a package or some kind of identity as you go into the marketplace. So that's our kind of soft offer this afternoon. We're more than willing to help. And I would encourage that if you have any questions or follow-up discussions, you can certainly get a hold of me through Alex and group. They know how to get a hold of me. We can sit down and talk about it. So that's really all I have on branding or on telling your story. If you have any questions or you want to discuss anything, I'm more than happy to answer them.
So we'll get to a couple of the questions that we have right now. One of the questions is a budgetary question, and it has to deal with how to get a brand noticed by consumers without a really large advertising expense. And can you kind of discuss the returns that you can see from advertising? I know a lot of farmers like to be able to spend money on things that they can touch, like a new tractor or a new implement and stuff like that. And so it's really hard to kind of visualize the returns that you get from branding your product.
Well, it's hard to it's hard, and I'm not. This isn't a cop out. This is a fact. It's hard to sit here and justify advertising on return on investment. Every single case is different. Every single effort has its own set of metrics and goals and objectives to achieve. So I would insist that anything that gets done from an advertising standpoint be measured, and measurement can be anything from consumers taking, literally paying, you're selling the product successfully, to are people engaging on your social media platforms and the like. So metrics are important, but each case is individual. So we believe in zero-based planning. What's the producer? What's the market area? What are we selling? What are the revenue goals? And then developing an investment that we would be able to prove payback on based on that very specific information. It's hard to generalize, and I don't want to mislead. In terms of budgets, social media is really a significant savings opportunity for those who can engage with customers on a digital basis. It's extremely efficient. It's very measurable, and you can change your message quickly. It gives you a lot more flexibility in the marketplace. And I know we've all kind of talked about it and discussed it. We live it here every day, and I can tell you it is becoming a significantly effective marketing tool for a lot of different kinds of brands and products. And clearly, farming and farm products are hot for this product, because of the interest that consumers have in content and storytelling and the things that you can talk to them about. It's critically important at that level for sure.
Awesome. So one of our other questions is more geared towards differentiation of a farm story.
Mm-hmm.
They ask, one of the challenges of working in the same industry as one of your friends and trying to reach a similar customer while telling a similar farm story. How do you differentiate yourself as a product in a market where you're kind of close with your competitors and trying to reach a similar audience? And how do you kind of drive home your point that my product is different in these ways without, verbatim saying it like that?
I understand the question. I don't think we want to start bashing our neighbors, over the head with competitive differences. I think the answer to differentiation and being able to stand out from your neighbor comes from your consumer. The consumer will tell you why you're different. In fact, I would argue that the consumer, there's plenty of room in the tent for everybody to play. And if marketers, if farmers do it right, they'll focus on their strengths without necessarily bashing or undermining their neighbor. And I think when there's a high tide, all boats rise. So I would argue that there's clearly compelling reason for a farmer to tell a story and do it coming from the consumer's perspective. That's the most important thing. Because consumers don't see you as competitors. They see you as business people with different products that come to the market differently. I don't think they see you necessarily as competitors.
Okay, great. If you guys have any more questions, please feel free to use the chat or the Q&A section. We want to make sure that we get all of your guys' questions answered. It's at the bottom of the screen on either side or next to the participants. There's a Q&A and a chat. Do you have any other points that you'd like to get out while we have everybody's ears, Chris?
Just that I would encourage considering the idea of telling your story. I think it's a great way to be successful and do it in a way that connects with consumers. I can't underscore the importance of emotion in selling food, in particular in selling food. It's very important that consumers connect the dots between what they're eating and how they got that product, how that product got to the table. And I think there's significant opportunity for those stories to be told. And again, I think they can complement one another and not necessarily compete with one another. So I just wanted to emphasize that piece of it because I think it bears repeating.
Right. So here's another question. What are some of the general questions that you can ask to your consumers to figure out what it is that they like about your product to kind of gear that towards your farm story?
We ask our consumers, we have kind of there's a number of questions that we ask, but specifically we ask them about, the basics. What do they interact with you for? What do they buy from you? Why do they buy from it? Why do they buy from you? What's special about what they buy from you? What's special about you? If they had to describe the farmer in, if they had to describe the farmer or the producer in certain terms, how would they describe them? Really, we try to get as creative with them as possible so they can start to develop. That we start to see a kind of a connection. It's not just about the produce, but it's the way the farmer talks about it, or the way the farmer interacts with them at the market, or the fact that they have a family that's working on the farm, or that it's a converted tobacco farm. There are different reasons. We call it peeling the onion back. You just got to keep peeling the onion back to get to those insights with consumers. And it's a matter of asking the question, why did you say that? Why do you believe that? Why is farmer so-and-so doing it that way? How do you feel about that? And interestingly enough, when we do this among enough consumers, we find that there are some commonalities that people feel, generally speaking, they feel the same way about a farmer. There's more agreement than there is disagreement. So it's kind of interesting to us how that works, how that plays out. But it's really interviewing the consumer specifically about his or hers why they buy and why they buy from that farmer.
All right. On to our next question. What's a good length for a story, and what kind of details about myself should I include?
Well, I don't know the individual, but it would depend on. It really depends on the specific circumstances of the farm and the individual. It depends on what does he or she think is special about what they do. Is it a legacy farm? Has it been in the family? Is there something that they get out of farming that is personal, or that tells an interesting story to a consumer? It really depends on what they're raising, who they are, where they are, the history of the farm. There's lots of stories. It's just a matter of sitting down and talking with them and really landing on the one that makes the most sense and the most relevance for the consumer. So again, a hard question to answer, but one that we can arrive at with enough conversation with the producer.
All right. So do you have any advice for someone who struggles with finding the right words to market themselves or their products or anything like that?
It's hard to do it on your own because you don't have that. You don't have somebody vetting. You can bounce ideas off of. So I would always look for someone else to vet the idea, to listen to the idea or listen to the words, and work with somebody and collaborate with somebody back and forth, and it'll get easier. It's awfully tough when you're out working 14, 15, 16 hours a day, 20 hours a day, and then coming home and figuring out, okay, how am I going to market myself? It's tough to, it's the last thing on the list that you're thinking about. On the other hand, there's help out there that you can get. There's other folks in your business or other people that you can vet. I encourage always back and forth, kind of a collaborative conversation between two people. Short of having us come out and talk to you, that would be an easy solution.
All right, and here's a really good question. Legacy farms get a great deal of positive attention in Kentucky, and this particular person has started their own family farm and have had good sale growth. But what kind of story would sell in Kentucky that isn't a legacy farm, that hasn't been around for a multi-generational period?
You mean what could be a potential story?
Right. Aside from the fact that they're not a legacy and they just started up.
I mean, I again, not knowing the individual and the specifics, but someone that's turned from, again, I'm going out on a limb here, but someone's turned from Wall Street to back to the farm. So there's been a complete conversion in career, because there's more importance in that than the other, if you will, or converting old tobacco crops or tobacco acreage to something that is vital to the future of Kentucky. A return to just doing it just to basics. There are stories there. It probably is more on the individual than it is on the land. But again, it would have to be, let's sit down and throw ideas. Let's hear the story or hear the reasons and figure out what the story could be.
All right. Do we got any more questions from our viewers out there? These are some really good questions, and it's definitely good to get these answered now. So, Chris, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
Probably the best way to get in contact with me is on my cell phone, which is 502-802-4986. Are you typing that out?
Yes.
Or you can get a hold of me at chrisb@hellofieldtrip.com.
All right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and wrap things up there. If you want to advance to your next slide or two and give everybody a double look at that contact information.
Okay, here you go.
Actually, we got one more question that just came in.
Okay.
How important is sticking to one story, i.e. switching the angle of the story based on the audience?
It's a very good question. Very good question. Theoretically, there's one core audience that represents your future in the business. And we would recommend landing on the story that resonates with that user or that potential customer and staying with it. However, there are times where other consumers or other segments that come into play, and that's going to require some consideration. Again, I can't emphasize enough of sticking. We would tend to want to stick with one story and stay with it. When you look at the great marketers and the great big huge brands in the world, they very rarely change their story. And when they do, it takes a long time and a lot of money to do so because they've discovered something is awry or wrong with what they're doing. So just taking a page out of that book, I would stick with the loyal user. What's the story that resonates? Now, remember, everybody, we get tired of our stories long before our customers do. I'll say that again. We get tired of our stories long before our customers do because we live with our story every day. Our customers don't. So I would encourage patience and consistency, and that will pay off.
All right. We'll give just another quick second to see if anybody has any other questions, and then go ahead and let everybody get back to the farms or work or whatever they got going on. But one thing I will say is thank you to everybody that made it out to catch the webinar. We really appreciate your all support, and we hope to get you guys all the information that you're looking for. And if you if you are looking for future Market Ready webinars, you can check out our Market Ready website. It's just www.uky.edu/marketready. And under the upcoming events section, you can look through there, and we'll have different upcoming trainings, webinars, conferences that we'll be attending. And so get on there and check us out. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook. We post all of our upcoming events like these webinars and all of our trainings on Facebook. So the webinar will be recorded if you guys want to go back and check it out a little bit later. We'll put that on our website as well under the resources section. So more than welcome to get on there and check out the previous webinars that we've done. We just want to thank Chris Becker for being with us and letting you guys know all about the importance of branding your farms and your products and just getting the word out about what you guys are doing. So
yes, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity, and hopefully I'll see most of you at the Farm Machinery Show next week in Louisville, or actually this week in Louisville.
Right. Yep. I'm sure a handful of us will be up there.
Okay.
All right, Chris. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Okay.